Well, welcome. This is our next episode of WARBC Pastor Meet and Greet, and I hope you've had a chance to look at some of the other videos that we've done with some of the other pastors. But today we have Pastor Joel Smith with us here, and so grateful that Joel is here. So, Joel, tell us a little bit about where you pastor and how long you've been there.
Okay. I'm the pastor at Maranatha Baptist Church in Navarino. There's a quirky thing about the mailing address where Shiocton is quite a ways away from our church location, but Navarino doesn't have a post office, so our mailing address, Shiocton, Navarino. Navarino's this blink of a town, no traffic light in Navarino, but we are a country church. We're out in the middle of cornfields, and we draw from a radius of at least 30, 35 miles in all directions. And so our attendance is usually around 100, but right now we're doing 2 services. Ever since COVID started, we give us a chance to spread out a little because we have this good problem where we don't have enough room for everyone in our auditorium. So we have a service at 8:30. Which is really early on a Sunday morning. And then in between the 2 services is Sunday school, and then at 10:45, which is the main service where we do a live stream now. We hadn't done a live stream before COVID, but that's good because not everyone has come back from the COVID situation. And then if somebody's got sickness or somebody, if like the last several weeks with snow and cold, they can participate even though they can't attend physically, because a lot of people come from a quite a distance, 25 miles, sometimes quite a ways, especially in the winter.
Yeah.
So 2 services, which is something to me. This phenomenon of preaching the same sermon twice is something I hadn't done before. And I'll give this thought of when I preached that first service, usually smaller numbers, but that doesn't matter. Preached the sermon, and we've got the service is over, and I preached that sermon. And as pastors, we know that there's more than just the physical going into a sermon. There's the emotional that, and you put in the, there's part of that spirit that's part of a sermon. And so during Sunday school, another gentleman is teaching, and I get a little bit of a break. So I'm sitting there with my wife in Sunday school, and I'm thinking, I've already preached my sermon. I don't really feel like preaching it again. But then when the time comes, the second service begins, we start singing and all of the preliminaries. And by the time that service is underway, and especially with the music, the worship, I am ready to preach the sermon again. Mm-hmm. And then there's the phenomenon of, okay, who did better, preacher number 1 or preacher number 2? And sometimes I feel like I did better the first time, and sometimes the second. It depends. But I never had observed that, of what the music does for the preparation for me as the preacher. So that was a very interesting aspect to this 2-service phenomenon. But again, we'd never done that before. It's not ideal because you have folks that, I haven't seen so-and-so in quite some time. Well, they go to the first, oh, that's okay. Right. So someone could be not attending for a while, and some people aren't even aware. Sure. And you haven't seen this friend for a while, and it's simply because there's 2 services. So it's not ideal. I don't see it as permanent, but it does solve this problem of the space issue. So it maybe it's temporary, but and we've talked about it as deacons. We've wondered how long this is going to be, but right now it's an indefinite period of time with this 8:30 service, and then the second service after Sunday school.
Yeah, I wondered about whether you thought the first sermon or the second sermon was the better one. It sounds like it depends on the week. You know, sometimes I think you can get
Yeah.
the practice run done, and then
Hmm.
you realize, oh, I meant to say this or whatever. But
Right.
you go both ways.
Definitely. There's been a couple times where my wife has, because my family goes to the first service, it just
Mhm.
works better for us, and also a big family that we have. The space issue, it just makes sense. She plays also. She plays the piano for the first service, and then another lady for the second. But there's been two different times I can think of that she's asked me a question about the sermon, not in a critical way, but just the application. There was one
Sure.
particular about I was preaching on the woman that touched Jesus' garment
Hmm.
and was healed, and just in that same time frame, there had been a lady, a close friend of one of the church members that had passed away, thinking that she had been healed, but then uh, the disease either came back or whatever the case was, but she ended up passing away after all, after thinking she had been healed. And my wife said, well, what about, our friend here, the mention the first name, she's really struggling with this because it had just happened. And so my wife's input was able to really enhance the second version of
Yeah.
that sermon. And I felt I was really benefited by that comment, and of course able to talk with this member as well. But that second, the approach that I took that second time around was, I felt it was better, just more beneficial as far as the application, or the meaning to us today of what went on when Jesus healed that woman.
That makes perfect sense. So you mentioned your family. Tell us about your family. I mean, you're married. You said a large family. How
Mm-hmm.
many children do you
Yeah.
have, and what's the age range?
Um, God's given us 8 children, and then one child in heaven. So there is never a dull moment around here. We really treasure boring. It doesn't happen very often at our house, but once in a while we get a chance of a quiet moment. But in all seriousness, God has blessed us greatly. Our quiver is full indeed.
Yeah.
Um, and our oldest is 16. We got, and then our youngest is 3 years old. We've got 5 boys and 3 girls,
Wow.
and so we're watching them grow up. And at the ripe age of 45, I'm just, life is kind of getting faster and faster as our children are growing, and I'm realizing, boy, that 18 years old is pretty close for our oldest, and things are, he's going to have his license soon, and things are going to change pretty dramatically. Our two oldest work with a dairy farmer, and
Okay.
have for quite some time. So giving them rides to work. It'll be nice when he gets his license, but still, it'll be, oh man, they are just growing up. And so, as I mentioned, our youngest 3 years old, and just watching them develop and learn. It's quite a journey. It's pretty exciting.
Wow. So where were you before coming to Wisconsin? Because I think, if I remember right, I think you and I came to serve in Wisconsin in our churches right about the same time. I
Mm-hmm.
came here in February of
Mm-hmm.
2013, and I think it was right around that time that you came here too. So,
Yeah,
uh,
in fact, January 2013 was
okay.
when we were official. We were in Alaska. Uh, so I'll back up a little bit. My wife and I got married in 2001 in Alaska.
Okay.
I had been living in Minnesota, and she had just graduated from Northland. Both of us graduated from Northland. I graduated in '98, and she in 2001. So um, we had met her freshman year, and then I took 5 years to finish, and there's a long story there. But because I had learned some non-academic lessons at Northland, and taking 5 years, God providentially led us together. She a freshman and me a senior. So we got married in Alaska because that was her home church in Fairbanks, and then we went down and came. I was going to Central. Well, she also took the same classes. We both got a degree, Master of Arts in Biblical Counseling
Okay.
at Central in Minneapolis. And so we graduated together, and then we were thinking, okay, well, now that we're done with seminary, life will slow down, and we'll just enjoy a couple years, see what God has for us next. Well, as it turned out, just a couple weeks after, and God directed us to go back to Alaska. So we had been contacted and called to that church, the same church that she grew up. So that was an interesting situation where this was the same church where her family had come in when she was in junior high, and now she's the pastor's wife. So some people were like, "Oh, this is so cute. Oh, how nice,"
Yeah.
So she was 25, I was 27 when we went back to Alaska in 2003.
Okay.
So we spent 9 years total up there. The first 3 years I was assistant pastor, and then that pastor retired, and then I was the senior pastor for 6 years, and learned a lot in the School of Hard Knocks. I learned a lot more in those 6 years than I ever did in school, but I benefited from some of those mistakes and difficulties there. And then God directed us to leave there, and then it was kind of a time of limbo. From September 2012 for weeks and months, and I tried to find a job. We were going to go back to Minnesota, and I was going to go back to school, but you kind of need to have a job.
Yeah.
And never could find a job. I looked everywhere that was plausible, never could find a job. And then I decided I was going to put my name out to be for ministry again. I was thinking, okay, I'll just be a person in the pew and go into school and just get back into pastoring later. But God said, no, I want you back into pastoring sooner. So long story short, Pastor Sorensen got my name through the Northland Placement Service. And he and I had seen the church on the website. And then he contacted me, got my name, and it was only a short distance away from where we were staying at the time. So I was literally had the attitude of, why not? What's the harm? So I filled out the application and the interview there, and then went to meet them, and God just directed those steps very distinctly. The church voted me as 100%. And that was important because there was this small minority in the previous church that created a lot of unwelcomeness to, and if it would have been this partial vote, then I don't think we would have been comfortable going. But 100% to me was God's sign saying, this is what I want you to do. So that was 2013 in the beginning of the year. So it's been, just mark your calendar. It's been about 8 years now. So
yeah. Like I said, I remember when I came here, it was right about that same time. So it was like a month later.
And I and your wife and I were students at Northland at the same time. So we recognized each other. That first was a pastor and wives retreat.
Yeah.
And we just matter of factly, she said, "Hi, Joel." And I said, "Hi, Anouk." And that was, oh, well, I figured you guys had been here. I didn't even realize that you had just came.
Yeah. We were just as green as you were. So, but yeah, it's hard to believe 8 years has gone by already, So, you mentioned some time in Alaska. You mentioned a big family. And I typically ask, what do people do in their free time and hobbies and things like that? And is this the point where you just laugh and scoff and say, "What free time?" you know?
Yeah, basically. I do, I do have a part-time job on the side, and that takes up a lot of time, obviously. I'm working for a bee farmer,
Hmm.
and that's hard work, but it's interesting. It's quite educational in many ways. Getting stung by bees is not the fun part of the job, but harvesting the honey, and right now we're working at a wood shop, basically just a few hours each week, but it's an income, but you could count it as a hobby. I kind of have to be careful and how many hours, because you got to keep up on your main responsibility, but it brings in some important income. I'll just mention briefly that my wife does have some health complications, and that it requires some money to address those matters. And
Yes.
so the church takes care of us, but there are some expenses that aren't covered by anything except just cash out of pocket. So that's the main reason that we need that second income part time.
Sure.
But
Well, and the fact that you have 8 children also would indicate that as well.
well, for the children's sake, we live on 2 acres, and we have a little farm. We
Okay, cool.
have and I'm not really an animal person, but I love a lot of people that love animals.
Hmm.
And I mean, my family there, I'm the
Yeah.
only one that is kind of, I could take or leave it. Every one of our children has a love affair with certain animals. So as I mentioned, my two oldest work at a dairy farm,
Hmm.
and my oldest loves the dogs. My second oldest, he milks goats each day, a couple times a day, in fact, and that is our milk for our family. And he loves what he does. It's hard work, but he is very diligent in doing that, and I am just I salute him for that hard work. He's 15 years old and really responsible with those goats. I think we've got 8 of them. Um, we have 4 dogs, which is crazy in and of itself,
Yeah.
but they're also an income because we breed them, one dog each year. We breed them, and
Mm.
there's a lot of people that love golden retrievers, and they're willing to part with several $100s for a puppy. So that's a lot of trouble, but it's worth it because it is a little bit of an income for our family as well. And then our third son, he his chores involve the chickens, so he gets the eggs each day, and even in winter time, those chickens are still laying some of those eggs, and that of course supplies our family as well.
Sure.
Our fourth child is a daughter, and she has a little brood of cats that she loves, and the cats keep the mice away. They do their job very well.
It's good.
But she loves those cats, and when the cats have kittens, then believe it or not, there are people who are willing to part with $50 in order to get a cat. Now that is a little bit hard for me to comprehend, but
Yes.
she sells those kittens well. So um, then our fifth child is a son, and he also helps with the chickens and some of the other chores. And then our sixth is a daughter, and she loves her little bunnies. She has
Okay.
bunnies, and that's just kind of a hobby for her. And then our two youngest don't have chores, but they love the
Wow.
animals as well. Um, so we have this little farm, this little zoo,
Yeah,
and that keeps a person hopping 24 hours a
you
day,
can
it
imagine.
seems.
I mean, you're a really good dad if you're willing to do all that and you're not an animal guy. So I salute you to that. That's
Yeah, I
awesome.
like I said, I can take it or leave it, but my wife is an animal lover to the utmost, and so the children evidently
Got
take
that from
after
her.
her. So, but it's a really good environment for the children
I
to
can
grow
imagine.
up. I really wouldn't have it any other way.
That's very cool. Okay, one last question. I always ask people, is there a book or some type of resource or recommendation that you would give to other pastors who might be listening in? And maybe it's a book or some other type of resource that you've benefited from that you would pass along. Any
Mhm.
recommendations?
Okay. Well, a couple thoughts is most of my reading lately, other than the scriptures, of course, has been biographies. I find those fascinating and inspiring, and particularly biographies of some of the persecuted saints, like Richard Wurmbrand, like um, Georgie Vins, and those are some of the older ones. But one I've come across recently was Peter Ramachik, who was in Russia in the time of about 50 or so years ago. And so those biographies have been extremely helpful to me in just processing the Christian life in general,
Yeah.
of thinking, in the current events that we have, we're seeing our freedoms threatened. And I'm looking at the persecuted church, and I'm thinking, you know what, those folks over in China or in North Korea, et cetera, they're probably looking at us and saying, you don't know what Christianity is all about. You might find out in the next generation, you might find out, and then you'll know really what it means.
Sure.
And it really has enhanced my appreciation for not just the sufferings of Christ, but how others are willing to suffer for him, and how it's a crown indeed, where the love of Christ is shed abroad in their hearts.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that is a truly awesome concept to me. Richard Wurmbrand in particular, who kind of started this for me, reading his book several years ago, and just in complete amazement of what God did in him. So that in general kind of summarizes what has been the majority of the reading lately.
Okay.
Is those biographies. A couple other resources. One is I've subscribed to World Magazine for many years, and not that I agree with everything, but it is very helpful to get a more broad perspective on the news, and a Christian, but not, they don't take the stance that I would take every time. And it's very healthy to read things that are from a different angle. And so that has been helpful to me in just the current events type of thing. But also, this is not a religious website. It's more, if it's religious, then it's more of a Catholic, but Intellectual Takeout it's a website, very conservative, but again, another exposure to a certain perspective on the news. So it's Intellectual Takeout, again, is the site. Again, it's not Christian, certainly not Baptist or anything, but it is helpful for that perspective. Short articles on different topics, whether current events or just philosophical matters.
Right.
Good input, just to keep well-rounded in your thinking.
Great.
So those are some thoughts.
Well, I sure appreciate those recommendations, and I appreciate you taking time today to talk and introduce yourself a little bit. I think that these videos are helpful for our association, pastors, to get to know each other some more. So, thanks for doing that, and I really appreciate the time today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you, Jeremy.
All right, you have a good day.
You too.